Hello, good evening, and welcome to Shafi Live. You are watching African Voices with me, Baillor, Jalloh, and Dr. Nkululeko Sibanda. And on today's show, we'll be discussing again Nigeria and Senegal, as the two countries recently re-elected their presidents for a second term in office. But before we start, it's a pleasure for me to introduce here very important people. One of them was even my former lecturer. That is nobody but Julie Ojinnaka-Ossamor. Welcome here.
Good evening.
And also next to Julie is Dr. Adegbola, who was here last week or 2 weeks ago, prior to the election.
Thank you.
So both of you are welcome.
Thank you very much.
Right, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be discussing Nigeria and Senegal today, which many of you will know the two countries have recently re-elected their president for a second term in office. Nigeria on the 23rd of February and Senegal on the 24th of February. Those were the two dates that the countries went into election. But for Nigeria, it was meant to be, as many of you will know, on the 16th of February, but due to logistic reasons, that did not happen. So on today's show, we'll be discussing the results. We'll be discussing the election violence in Nigeria during the campaign, and we'll be discussing the impact of the election and also what lays ahead for the two presidents, i.e. Senegal and Nigeria. But first, let's start with Nigeria, because the two guests that we are having here today, they are both Nigerians, and they might know a lot more than we do here. So first with Julie, to you, you were the one who was not here prior to the election. What's your take on the whole election and the way things have gone through?
Okay, I think as a whole, we are grateful that the election went as smoothly as it did, that so many people participated, and it means that Nigeria is making a way, making progress in terms of democratic activities and so on. So yes, all the political parties, there was a lot of political parties that participated, and that's a positive thing. Both young and old participated. There was a lot of activities, a lot of buzz in the country, and so on. So there's a lot of positives that came out of the election. So we're very grateful for that.
Okay. Before we get to the results between the two main political parties, that is the PDP and the APC, Buhari has been declared the winner so far, and as we talk, Atiku Abubakar has already filed kind of contesting the result, and he's, according to reports, his legal team is already dealing with that. In terms of the result, the way things have come out, will you say the result was kind of free and fair?
Yes, I would say that it was free and fair compared to previous elections and so on. Everybody had the opportunity to go out and vote. INEC had organized the election from way before, had been mandated to do this from more than 2 years ago. And so they'd actually organized quite a robust system in place to ensure that people receive their voting cards and so on, so that they're able to go out and vote. So yes, the election was free and fair, and one has to take into consideration the geopolitical entity that is Nigeria, which is huge. There's some areas that's really very difficult to navigate because the distance from the center. So INEC did a very good job in trying to get the people together to go out and vote. Yeah, so I thought it was very fair and free.
Sibanda?
That's a hard one, because if you're looking, I'm just trying to find out how we justify that the electoral body did a good job. I mean, they organized an election in which just over 51% people of the registered voters voted. It's a drop from about 16% reduction. In voter turnout, they cancelled the voting and postponed it by nearly a week. And you have an election now that's to a certain extent contested, and I'm wondering how that is a success.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. I think, obviously, I mean, the drop in number of voters is not unconnected with the fact that the election was postponed by a week. Like Mrs. Ossamor explained, the entity called Nigeria is a very, very massive entity, and it does take quite some effort to be able to organize elections in a developing democracy such as Nigeria. But that aside, you had a situation where, as a result of the postponement, people had traveled or commuted from one part of the country to another, and people had put plans in place for a number of other things in terms of, related to personal activities or ceremonies. So, and there had been people who had traveled from outside Nigeria, who probably could not take part in the subsequent election. So that might have contributed to the drop in number of voters. But then linking that to the reasons given by INEC, I have good reason to believe that the shift, the push forward was not unconnected with some security reasons. And sometimes some of these reasons are not necessarily disclosed publicly, but there are sometimes security undertones that influence the decisions, national decisions, such major decisions, such as that, and which may not necessarily be publicly disclosed. Yes, I would have preferred a scenario where that election was not postponed. I think the majority of Nigerians would have preferred that. But by and large, what we wanted was ultimately a successful election that did not degenerate into a crisis. And I think for most Nigerians, we were pleased that that election did not degenerate into a crisis. And we can take some
looking at what you've just said, are you saying Nigerians, you are getting used to now, or you are always getting pleased now of elections being postponed, and it should be like normal now rather than it happening at the time it should happen, but with it being postponed, you prefer that if I'm understanding what you are saying, looking at security reasons?
No, that's not what I'm saying. So as a matter of fact, if you look at the number of general elections we have held, perhaps less than 50% or less than 25% have been postponed. So it's not necessarily a way of life for us, but there will be those certain circumstances.
Was the 2015 one postponed or not?
The one before, yes, that was postponed as well. So there will be scenarios such as that, but then it doesn't necessarily mean it is a way of life. But I'll tell you, if there is good reason to postpone an election for the safety and convenience of people, then I think, we must put the safety of people.
But INEC did not, if I'm not mistaken, INEC did not put the reason as security reasons. It was logistic reasons, they said.
Well, I think as Dr. Bola had mentioned, some of the security issues obviously will not be trended all over the world, and we won't be told that. It's only after the election that you'll get to know what the reasons are. And I think, again, we have to take into consideration that there are issues of Boko Haram and all the other insurgency groups and so on. And so there are certain things that will happen on the ground that we may never be aware of and may never be disclosed. And so therefore, that would also have an impact on the reasons why the election was postponed. And I think that if we have to gauge that against people's lives, I think it would rather that they did postpone than to have so many people die, and then that would be quite catastrophic, because then people will say, here we go, typical example, they can't do this, this is an example of them not being able to rule or carry out an election, and that would also compound the situation on the national political life.
I'm struggling today. Okay, I'll tell you why. I've had very good excuses for why a simple thing as running an election should be seen as complex. I mean, you both said that Nigeria is a complex. God damn, yes, it is complex, and the election authority knew that.
Yes.
And what is it that they did in a week that they couldn't do in a year to improve the security? I mean, if you give me that, then I'll say, yeah, we're pulling our socks up here. We're not. We're just good at giving excuses. They should have had the election that day. I'll tell you what. With an election that has had a 51%, that to me is an illegitimate election. Because you're so close to the margins. You're so close to the margins. How do you have a government that's elected with just over half of the eligible population being allowed or able to vote? Could this government have won an election because most of those who support the opposition are the ones who had traveled? Could we argue that? That the margins were torn apart by how the election was organized?
Can I just cut in very quickly?
Yeah, come on in.
You know, illegitimacy is, I think, you know, it is perhaps subjective, and it depends on the context. So I'm not sure if you have had a look at the Nigerian Constitution, and you know the
Dr. Ojo,
I'm just asking,
is not a constitutional or legal concept.
Well,
it is a political concept.
It is not necessarily. It is partly a political. It is partly a political concept.
Yeah.
You know. So, but then you know, you described 51%, and that's why I'm asking you. I'm just kind of pinning down. So do the rules in Nigeria, the electoral rules, do they describe 51% as illegitimate? And a 51% turnout, if they don't, then it perhaps would be...
Doc, just march away from this legalistic argument. I'm not making a legal argument.
No.
We're not in court.
That's why perhaps the term illegitimate is a very strong term, and maybe we might want to
let me try to intervene. Let's move away from that legitimacy for now. Let's go into the results. Mr. Buhari won with about, if I'm not mistaken, more than 50%, or about 56%, with Atiku Abubakar, who came second, about 44%. So Mr. Abubakar is contesting the results. So which side of the story here, or which side of the election result that Mr. Abubakar is not happy about? If any of you can...
I think that, good question. I think that's the question we need to ask Mr. Abubakar.
Yeah.
You know, ask Mr. Atiku, because we can't fathom why, you know, he's contesting the election. You know, given that most people have, you know, said that it was free and fair, and that they were happy that there wasn't any major incidences. And for him to contest it means that obviously he probably wants to be in power by every means, you know, but the reality is that the people have spoken, and it's important that he take on board what the people have said. It would be a waste of the country's money to be going through a court system to fight and find out what, you know, to contest the election and so on, because there are no evidence to suggest that he had won the election and then that was taken away from him. You know,
but if you look at the violence that occurred during the election, where in some parts of Nigeria or in some parts of the country where people were coming, smashing boxes, you know, trying to steal boxes. Do you think that can be a reason to say some of those boxes that were smashed or some of those places that were attacked, those are the places where I have a big support or a huge support?
You can also say that there's a lot of stuff that was trending during the election, you know, whereby you had you know, people on a WhatsApp with stuff, you know, having the voting cards, marking off, you know, making comments about marking off stuff for the PDP party and so on, but to the detriment of APC. So you could also say that the reason why maybe Buhari did not get maybe 70% of the vote is because a lot of the time also there were, you know, people who were violating, if you like, the whole electoral or the voting system, you know, very corrupt way. So this is what happens in elections. The opposition or everybody will always say that I should have won. I should have, you know, got because Buhari could have easily said I could have got a bigger majority because I know that I had a very good support. We also know that, you know, Abubakar is also saying the same thing. You know, that he should have got more of the share of the vote because he had more supporters. But we don't know that. It's all allegations upon allegation, and one side will allege one thing against the other. And because we have, you know, Instagram and WhatsApp and all the rest of Facebook, all kind of things are, you know, through the social media. It's you know, just throwing everything around, and people are just bashing their heads against each other. And I think that there's a lot of, we have to be very careful that we don't fall into the trap of falling into this notion that, you know, because these people showed this, that's how it is, because anybody could make up any of those stories and throw it out there.
Absolutely. I think I completely agree with Mrs. Ossamor. I think, you know, both sides actually experienced these negative activities. So both sides could argue that we were pushed back in areas that are not necessarily our strongholds. So what you saw really was a scenario where each political party kind of capitalized on, you know, the opportunities that were open to them in their stronghold. So it would be very difficult, I think, for Mr. Abubakar to make a case that will take the mandate away from Mr. Buhari. I think it would be a very flawed case that he will be presenting in any court of jurisprudence. It would be flawed because there is monumental evidence out there to suggest that the PDP, his political party, also manipulated the elections in their own stronghold. So you have those sort of dynamics. You know, I think what we require is a situation where Atiku Abubakar, you know, accepts defeat in good faith, because the evidence, even before the election, suggested that he was going to lose that election. The empirical evidence, it was clear that he would lose. And I think I would expect Mr. Buhari to, you know, to extend an olive branch towards Mr. Abubakar so that we can make progress.
I'm struggling again, because the clear defense of the winner that I think you're mounting is forgetting one thing, that the legitimacy of the election or challenging an election has nothing to do with what the challenger also did. It is whether or not the whole system was made credible, or the whole system could have produced a credible results. What I'm not hearing is you saying, look, the electoral body, the electoral commission did these things to make sure that none of the parties was able to cheat. What I hear you say is that, oh, well, they cheated too, so they have no right to approach the court. But it is the duty of the independent electoral commission to make sure that no one has an opportunity to even cheat, because elections depend, the results of an election and the legitimacy that comes out of it depends on processes and procedures being followed by, enforced by the authority that be. And in this case, the Electoral Commission is responsible for that. And what I'm hearing is that you have doubts that they were able to make sure that none of the parties was acting inappropriately. No. You have 300 people now, 300 plus people who have been arrested for attempted cheating. Several people died in this election. And I'm saying, could an election that has those characteristics produce legitimacy.
Yeah, then if we go down that pathway, perhaps no election ever in Africa,
not only in Africa,
not only in Africa,
the whole of the world,
but across the globe would be able. And till tomorrow we talk about the election between Al Gore and George Bush.
Yes,
so you do have those.
You're anyone cheating? No.
I'm just.
No.
Of course.
No.
I'm not.
No. You're oversimplifying again.
Can I make?
You're oversimplifying again, Doc. Let's not do that. We're not making. No. We can't. We've been hearing this for a good part of nearly 20 years now, and it is utter false. Let's be very clear.
What is false?
The George Bush example is utter false. It is not equivalent to what we're talking about. No one was killed in the American election.
No, I'm only relating it to what you said.
What I said is that people were killed.
No.
People were arrested while trying to cheat. No one was arrested in the American election trying to cheat. No one was killed.
Can I just say something, Dr. Sibanda? No system is ever foolproof.
I'm not saying it's foolproof.
So therefore, you have a situation in Nigeria.
But you can have an election without death.
Can I just finish that?
Yeah.
You have okay. Let's look at it this way. Okay, you are comparing American situation.
I am not.
Yeah. But the point is that if we compare that situation, we're just on a losing battle because you look at when Nigeria gained its independence, all the other African countries and so on.
Absolutely.
So we cannot. No, it's not an excuse. Let's be realistic about this and not be.
But you can't have your cake, eat it, and still have it.
Okay. Your
side.
Yes,
it is your side that introduced America to this debate.
So let's
not
look
my side.
let's look at this.
So don't pin me.
It's all right. Okay, the point is this: if we have a situation whereby INEC has done their bit, it's like
it's not good enough.
Hold on a minute. It's like in this country, we had a situation whereby the government implemented the poll tax and so on. It didn't stop people from rioting. So the reality is that INEC has gone out of its way, organized, put things together, put the cards together, took them to their bowling boots and so on, organized people to sit around to make sure that things are happening, have security guys around and so on. What more can they do? People still found a way to want to steal things, and they were arrested. 300 people were arrested. It wasn't as if they did it and they got away with it. They were arrested. So which means that the system had things in place to be able to take care of those, to check those things. So we cannot.
I think
you're doing me a favor.
If I can return to the point. You see, the point I was trying to make is it relates to your definition and your constant definition of this legitimacy, where there is no iota of problems or challenges in an election. But what we are trying to say is that every election everywhere experiences some form of challenge and difficulty, but then the system in that country or within that context tries to address that challenge to the best of its ability, which is exactly what has happened in Nigeria. We're not saying it's perfect. We're not saying it was a perfect election.
No. I'm asking you to listen to yourself.
Can I
Don't
make
listen
the
to
point?
Me, listen to yourself.
Can I make the point?
Yeah.
So these all relates back to the point of legitimacy. What you seem to be saying is that a legitimate election is one that is completely free of fracas, is one that is completely free of problems, of challenges. But what we are saying
that.
So can you then
give me the last 20 seconds to explain this? I'm not saying that.
Okay.
You said, not me.
Yes.
You said that Atiku could not challenge the election because his guys too were sending messages, were doing bad things.
I didn't say he could. I said he is free. I said, Atiku is free.
You said his challenge would fail as a result of that. And I said, if you are saying prima facie on the face of it, what you're saying seems to suggest that you accept that there were some improprieties on both sides.
As there are always improprieties in every election. So, go on, sir.
Well, in that case, let me just stop you there.
Do you understand? As there is. So in every election, everywhere.
In terms of this debate, it's not going to end between the two of you regarding the legitimacy. So let's just stop there for now and let's go for a short break.
But I think...
and we'll be back soon, Julie.
Okay, sorry.